Is the United States of America too big to fail? It's a question that feels almost treasonous to ask. We are talking about a civilization that commands the most terrifying military machine in human history. A nation whose currency is the literal engine of the global economy. A culture that has exported its movies, its music, and its values to every single corner of the inhabited world. For the better part of a century, America hasn't just been a player on the world stage, it has been the stage itself. And yet, when you open the ancient texts, when you scroll through the final apocalyptic chapters of the Bible, this modern-day Rome is hauntingly, terrifyingly silent. You see the names of ancient enemies. You see Babylon. You see Persia. You see the rise of a revived European power. But you do not see the United States of America. How is that possible? How could the most dominant superpower the world has ever known simply vanish from the most detailed prophetic roadmap in history? It is a silence so loud, it has baffled theologians and terrified believers for generations. But what if I told you that America isn't missing at all? What if the fate of the West isn't absent from the text, but encrypted within it, hidden in plain sight, tucked away behind ancient Hebrew idioms, paradoxical symbols, and geopolitical riddles that we are only just now beginning to solve? Today, we are going to act as forensic investigators. We are going to peel back the layers of history and theology to analyze the four leading theories explaining America's mysterious role in the end times. We are going to find out if this silence is an oversight or if it is a specific, terrifying warning. To understand the gravity of this mystery, you first have to understand the scale of the anomaly. If you look at the prophet Daniel, he lays out a timeline of human government that is surgically precise. He predicts the rise and fall of empires centuries before they happened. He describes the succession of world powers that would impact the land of Israel. And yet, in the chaotic, fire-filled visions of the end of days, the American eagle is nowhere to be found. Now, the skeptic, and perhaps the most rational historian, will give you the context theory. They will tell you that the Bible is an ancient Near Eastern document. It was written by prophets standing in the dust of Jerusalem and Babylon, focusing entirely on the immediate geographic neighbors of Israel. From this perspective, the Americas were a landmass that didn't even exist on their maps. America isn't mentioned for the same reason that Japan, Australia, or Antarctica aren't mentioned. It's simply out of scope. It's a logical argument. It's clean. It makes sense. But for the student of prophecy, that explanation feels too easy. It feels insufficient, because if God is truly the author of history, and if America has been the primary vehicle for spreading the gospel and protecting Israel for the last century, its absence feels less like a geographical oversight and more like a deliberate redaction, which leads us to the darker possibilities. Is the silence a sign that America, for all its current glory, is destined to become a ghost town before the end arrives? This brings us to our first major theory, the Great Collapse. The idea here is chillingly simple. The reason the United States isn't a major player in the final act of human history is that, by that time, it has ceased to be a major power. It hasn't necessarily been nuked off the map, but it has been hollowed out. History is essentially a graveyard of empires that thought they were immortal. The Babylonians, the Romans, the British, they all followed a specific trajectory. They went from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back into bondage. Look at the warning signs flashing on the dashboard right now. First, the economic pillar. The U.S. dollar has been the undisputed king of global finance, the exorbitant privilege that allows America to print its way out of trouble. But that armor is cracking. In 2001, the dollar made up 72% of global reserves. Today, it's sliding toward 58%. We are seeing the rise of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, actively building a financial architecture designed to bypass Washington. They are diversifying. They are buying gold. They are preparing for a post-American world. Then there is the internal decay. A house divided against itself cannot stand. We are witnessing a nation tearing itself apart at the seams politically and culturally. But perhaps most critically, from a biblical perspective, is the spiritual vacuum. In just over 15 years, the percentage of Americans identifying as Christian has plummeted by 16 points. The spiritual bedrock that the Founding Fathers claimed was necessary for a free republic is eroding into sand. In this theory, America doesn't need to be conquered by an invading army. It simply rots from within, becoming a second-rate power, too weak, too broke, and too divided to intervene when the Antichrist rises in the East. But there is another option, a theory that suggests America is there, but it's hiding behind a code name. This is the young lion theory. To understand this, we have to look at a very specific prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 38. This is the famous Gog and Magog war, a massive invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations from the uttermost north, led by a figure named Gog. Most scholars identify this northern aggressor as a Russian-led alliance, possibly including Iran and Turkey. But look at the bystanders. Ezekiel 38, verse 13, mentions a group that doesn't fight, but merely protests. It lists Sheba and Dedan, likely the Arab states of the Gulf, and the merchants of Tarshish, with all its young lions. This is the key. Who is Tarshish? Many biblical archaeologists identify Tarshish as a great maritime power located to the far west of Israel, often linked to the ancient tin mines of Spain or the British Isles. If Tarshish represents Great Britain, the mother lion, then who are the young lions? They are the offspring, the colonies that grew up to be strong nations in their own right. The United States, Canada, Australia. If this interpretation holds, it paints a pathetic picture of future American foreign policy. When Israel is facing annihilation, the United States doesn't send the Marines. It doesn't launch airstrikes. It issues a diplomatic note. The verse says, they ask, "Have you come to take a plunder?" It's a weak, toothless question. It implies that while America still exists, it has lost the will or the capacity to fight. It stands on the sidelines, watching the fire, paralyzed by indecision or weakness. But if you think that's bleak, the next set of theories is infinitely darker. There are those who believe America isn't missing, and it isn't passive, it is the villain. These are the controversial, fringe theories that identify the United States with the beast from the earth in Revelation 13. The text describes a beast that rises not from the sea, which usually represents the ancient, populated nations of the old world, but from the earth, a symbol of a new, relatively empty wilderness. The description is haunting. It has two horns like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. Think about the symbolism. A lamb is gentle. It represents innocence, perhaps even Christianity. It suggests a nation born with noble intentions, founded on the principles of liberty, freedom of speech, and religious tolerance. Two horns like a lamb, but the voice is the dragon, and the dragon is always Satan. This theory suggests a terrifying bait and switch. A nation that looks like a lamb, that sells itself as the defender of human rights, but eventually uses its immense global surveillance, its military tech, and its economic sanctions to force the world into worshiping the system of the Antichrist. Aligned with this is the theory of Mystery Babylon. Revelation 17 and 18 describe a global superpower, a great harlot who sits on many waters. She is the center of world commerce. She makes the merchants of the earth rich with the abundance of her delicacies. She exports her culture, her immorality, and her intoxication to every king and peasant on earth. When she falls, the stock markets of the world collapse, and the merchants weep because no one buys their cargo anymore. While many see this as a religious system or a revived Rome, it is hard to deny the parallels to modern American consumerism, a system that has seduced the entire planet into the worship of material things. However, there is a fourth possibility, a theory that explains the sudden, violent disappearance of America from the world stage, not by economic collapse and not by moral corruption, but by a divine extraction. This is the theory of the rapture. If you subscribe to the pre-tribulation view that Christ returns to snatch away his church before the final judgment, you have to ask a logistical question. What happens to the United States? Despite the decline, America is still home to millions of believing Christians. It has the highest concentration of evangelicals in the Western world. Imagine the scenario. In a fraction of a second, the twinkling of an eye, millions of people simply vanish. But not just random people. We are talking about pilots flying 747 seconds, surgeons in the middle of operations, senators, generals, police officers, mothers, fathers. The immediate result isn't just grief, it is total, systemic collapse. The power grid fails, supply chains snap instantly, the stock market hits zero, law enforcement evaporates, the United States would cease to be a superpower in less than an hour. It wouldn't be conquered, it would be decapitated. In this scenario, America isn't in the book of Revelation, because America effectively ceases to exist as a functional state the moment the church is removed. It becomes a chaotic wasteland, easily absorbed by the rising powers of the East and Europe, completely irrelevant to the geopolitical chess match of the apocalypse. So, where does this leave us? We have four theories: a slow decline into irrelevance, a passive, toothless, diplomatic protester, a lamb that speaks like a dragon, or a nation hollowed out by the rapture. The Bible doesn't give us a specific name, it doesn't give us coordinates, but perhaps the ambiguity is the message. Perhaps the silence is the loudest warning of all. We are conditioned to think that our nation, our economy, and our military are the center of the universe. But the Bible reminds us that to God, the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are dust on the scales. They rise, they rage, and they fall. The silence concerning America in the end times suggests that our ultimate security cannot be found in the stars and stripes. It cannot be found in the Federal Reserve. It cannot be found in the Constitution. The only kingdom that survives the final chapter is the one that is not of this world. The prophetic timeline isn't a puzzle for us to solve so we can build a bunker. It is a clock ticking down, urging us to shift our allegiance from the temporary empires of man to the eternal kingdom of God. The question isn't, is America in the Bible? The question is, are you in the book of life?